April 23, 2013, Clay released their magnum opus, a game that uses death as its main mechanic to force players to always be on their toes. Clay released Don't Starve. Now, Don't Starve is an open-world survival horror game where your main goal can either be survive for as long as possible, meaning not dying to monsters, not going insane, and of course, not starving. Or you could go the other route, which is adventure mode, that allows you to reach the real ending of Don't Starve. Now, this game is widely beloved by the gaming community, myself included. This game just offers something very unique at its core. Imagine a whole entire game centered around the mechanic of permadeath. No, not that one. But during its release, not much games aside from roguelites and roguelikes like Binding of Isaac, or old arcade games that centered around, a one life system unless you put another quarter in them, really explored the permadeath mechanic. So when Don't Starve got introduced to the world as a very harsh, no-holds-bar survival game where you die in the game, you die in real life, where when you die once, your world just gets erased, gamers just ate that up. Every popular Let's Play YouTuber, when those still existed, was playing this game, and the thing is, everybody sucked at the game. Which, weirdly enough, is a very big appeal of the game, because gamers at their core are really just masochists that love getting shoved down, stepped on, and whipped by a really good boss fight. And I was no exception. Like, I was there when the developers added the Screecher mod, which is basically a whole mod that turns the whole game into a Slenderman type thing. So yeah, I have been following this game for more than a decade now. Man, I'm getting old, said the 23-year-old. So imagine my delight when Clay announced that there would be a multiplayer version of this game. I was so hyped since I always wanted to play this game with my brother, and only my brother because I really had no friends at the time. Anyway, this was a very odd decision though, because Clay made it clear themselves that they were not really interested in adding multiplayer to Don't Starve. Mainly because it would go against the core philosophy that they were going for, which was an isolated survival horror experience. That's why it was really odd when they ended up kind of breaking not only that philosophy of theirs, by making a separate Don't Starve game that went against every core philosophy that they have had with the original Don't Starve game. But that's besides the point. I played the game for over 200 hours. I love it, but I can never recommend this game. Don't Starve at its core is a survival horror game that really pushes for the idea that you have to be careful at every step of the way, because you only really have one shot here. Once you die, it's over. Save deleted and all of your hard-earned progress is gone, so you will really feel that sense of dread throughout the whole entire game. And I tell you that this was so much fun. I love feeling the intense levels of isolation and high-stakes action. It's really like watching a horror film. It's just the adrenaline that you feel when you're getting spooked. But the thing is, this feeling is sorely lacking in Don't Starve Together, because this game isn't really a survival horror game, nor is it an isolated experience. This game is really a survival boss rush game. Don't Starve Together made 3 big changes to the original schematic of the game. First was to eliminate the sense of dread by adding multiplayer and more ways to revive yourself. In Don't Starve, the sense of dread really came from you feeling that you're isolated. Like, sometimes you would hear distant cries in the woods while you're just camping, and that's part of the experience. Feeling that you're lost in the woods, you're lost in this world, you're lost in the constant. And as for the resurrection mechanics, it's very limited when it comes to the original Don't Starve, and sometimes it's not really that worth. But the thing is, these 2 additions were essential. Because, well, firstly, the multiplayer aspect, because that was the main point of the whole game. And the more ways to revive yourself was also an unavoidable game mechanic. Because what's less fun than playing an entire game session but your friend has been dead since the last session? Without these easy ways to revive yourself or your friends, you would just be forced to make a new world every single time one of you makes a sucky mistake. Like, imagine doing really well at one run and your friend just goes AFK to get some water and ends up dying. That would just not feel right, to have all of that progress just be shoved to the ground or like thrown away just because of that one simple mistake. The second big change is that the game is now a live service game. Don't Starve is a game that hasn't gotten a new content update since 2018 and hasn't had any patches for over a year now, while Don't Starve Together has been getting constant updates throughout the months and are currently in the process of adding skill trees to every single character in the game. This isn't really a big problem, but I am just butthurt that it seems like the other game just seems to be abandoned at this point. But, you know, what can you do? Don't Starve Together is just a much more profitable game. Them skins aren't gonna sell themselves, you know. And the last big change that they made to the game was that it was now less of a survival horror game and now it's more of a boss rush game. This means that the whole game is now designed for you to always be preparing for the next boss to fight. And this fight is important because it's what progresses the story. Compare that to the original Don't Starve, which is more of an open-ended game if you don't pick the adventure mode, and you just have to survive in this game. And the game doesn't even point you to any direction, just drops you in the constant and do whatever you want. But now, it's more of a checklist of what you need to do to prepare for the next boss fight. For example, first you have to explore the whole map so that you can, have the idea of the certain set pieces that you have to go to for certain boss fights. And while you're exploring the map, you need to find the terrarium so that you can fight the Eye of Terror to have the best helmet early game, so that, boss fights later on would be much easier. While you're at it, you better be preparing for your next boss fight, which is most likely going to be the fight with the Dragonfly. This is because the Dragonfly drops a lot of essential gems that are required for you to have a successful ruins rush. You also have to bear in mind that you're not really preparing for winter in this game. You're preparing for the fights that you have to do during winter. Meaning, before winter even strikes, you need to rush the ruins. Because the ruins has the ancient crafting table, or whatever this was called again. And this is important because you can get the Dwarf Star staff for this so that you can have perpetual warmth throughout winter and even a perpetual light source throughout the whole entire game. This will be helpful for your fight against Deerclops and even Claws. So you go kill the Ancient Guardian, craft your Dwarf Scroll, and have perpetual warmth throughout the whole entire game now. Next, you'll probably be preparing for that Deerclops fight, and then after that, preparing for the next season to fight for those bosses, and then the next boss, and now I think you get my point. Now, I'm not saying that that's the only way that everyone has to play the game. Of course, even when the first time I played this game, this is not how I played the game. I really just played this as normal Don't Starve, but with other people involved. Like, there are even some bosses that you can just straight up ignore in this game, and it won't have any tangible cost really, because it's still a survival game. But there is one major problem to that, and that's because now that this game is a live service game, it will continuously have new updates, and these updates also contain story beats. And to get the next part of these stories, what do you need to do? You need to kill the latest bosses that they add to the game. Meaning, you also have to kill the previous bosses before you can even get to the next bosses. And then lies another problem that if you want to access the new content quicker, then you'd have to beat all of these bosses. You have to play this whole entire game in the most efficient way possible, meaning you're just going to treat this game as a boss rush game. And because of this structure, it becomes very messy, in my opinion. Like, I have 200 hours in this game, and I still have not seen the Celestial Guardian. This is mostly my fault because I usually just end the playthrough after killing the Bee Queen or killing all the bosses of the Reign of Giants DLC. So unless you're willing to put in all of those hours and put so much hours just learning the whole entire game and how to do boss rushes and how to do all of these like efficiently, you're probably gonna take forever to even see the new contents of the game. And you see, I don't really have much of a problem with these changes. Now that's a lie, I kinda do, but in my opinion, those changes and those like problems that I had with the game does not really stop me from recommending this game to anyone else. So what makes me compelled to tell people to avoid this game if they don't have the mental fortitude of Sneeko during his Netorase escapades? Well, it's the combination of all of these problems and the combat. The combat system of Don't Starve Together and Don't Starve are basically identical to a T. And I would describe this combat system as simple, not the best, but it can get the job done. Like, you never really played the original Don't Starve for the combat. Combat was just there as a barrier to the resources that you would like to get to prolong your survival. So what exactly is the issue here if I think that the combat system of the original Don't Starve was not even that bad and was essential to its game structure? What exactly is the problem here? 2 words: balance and context. Firstly, balance. You see, to balance the original boss of Don't Starve in a multiplayer setting, Clay needed to scale the health and the damage of these bosses so that it wouldn't be too easy. But the problem lies with the new boss's HP not scaling to the amount of players in the game. Meaning that a dragonfly that has 27,500 HP will have the same amount of health whether there are 15 people in the server or 1. And that sucks. In comparison, Don't Starve is a single player game and its dragonfly only has 2,750 health. That's literally a 10 times multiplier. In my opinion, Don't Starve's bosses had the right amount of HP, like pitch perfect in my opinion, that gave the right amount of fun, challenge, and not making the fight too long. Not making it feel like a drag, because the combat system again is not really the best mechanic in the game. Like, look at this. Riveting gameplay right here. So, in my opinion, every single boss fight that you have aside from Deerclops in Don't Starve Together is just such a drag. It takes way too long to fight them with just a bunch of repetitive actions. Like, look at this dragonfly fight. This is not my footage, by the way. It's this guy's footage. You're basically doing the same thing over and over and over again with not much, mechanically enticing thing to do. It's very boring. Like, I understand Clay's mindset that they didn't want this game to be finishable for only one person, since this game's point was really just for a multiplayer setting. But my problem is, even with 2 to 3 people, it still takes forever. And the weird thing is that the kiting combat mechanic of Don't Starve Together doesn't even work that well in multiplayer. This leads me to my second point: context. In the original Don't Starve, it's mainly a survival horror game. So the combat mechanics is not really the game itself, it's just a part of the game. It's a means to defend yourself against the dangers of this world, and it is a means so that you can get the resources that you need that's protected by the harsh creatures of this world. So it's not the main game mechanic of this game. You don't play Don't Starve for the combat, you play it to want to survive. Don't Starve Together, though, is completely different in context, because Don't Starve Together now is a boss rush game, meaning combat is the game. And as I said earlier, the combat system, the kiting combat system that Don't Starve Together has, is not really that fitted well in a multiplayer setting. Enemy aggro is so finicky in this game, so fighting a boss like Dragonfly with 3 people is more of a hassle than just fighting it solo. Like, I would really not mind this boss fight, even if it did have this freaking insane health, if the combat system was immaculate. But the thing is, it isn't. It's literally hit, hit, walk for the whole entire game. And that is the main reason why I just can't, with good conscience, recommend this game to anyone. It's a game about fighting a bunch of bosses with a combat system that's just so lackluster. And Clay isn't really making it any better because for some weird reason they keep refusing to add like some sort of setting to have the boss health scale to the amount of players in the server. Meaning boss fights will always just be more of a war of attrition than a war of skill and game sense. Like, I don't think it's a hot take that if your game's about fighting bosses, your combat system needs to be amazing and your balancing of said bosses should be the main priority of the game. But you see, I'm a freaking masochistic gamer, so of course, I still like this game. But I would still never wish this pain onto any other person. It's that one game that I would call a guilty pleasure more than anything else, even though it's one of the most popular games out there. So those are my thoughts, and if you have yours, share them in the comments. See ya.